You can see them everywhere. Help wanted signs are posted to many businesses in Burlington, the state, and across the country. Our worker shortage is gripping the country as businesses scramble to try and fill open positions. Recently, at the Middlesex 3 Coalition's annual meeting, Massachusetts Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development, Rosalind Acosta, spoke about the challenges facing businesses and addressed some of the misperceptions about why people are not returning to work, including the idea they would rather stay at home and collect unemployment.
You know, on September 4th, we saw 300,000 people drop off unemployment. And there was a bit of a misconception, and I think all of us were kind of holding our breath saying, you know, we're looking for people, where the heck are they? Oh, it's those damn unemployment benefits, and that's why they're not coming to work. We knew that wasn't going to be the sole reason. And back in June, as you may recall, about 28 governors stopped the federal pandemic unemployment early. And so we looked very closely at, you know, so what happened to folks? Did everybody just rush back to work? And a third of the people rushed back to work. 2/3 did not.
Secretary Acosta said her office is trying to find the roots of the issue.
We've really done a lot of work to try to figure out where is everyone and what's going on. And unfortunately, it's not an easy answer. It's a multi-pronged answer, complicated. Women have been really, really disproportionately hurt in this pandemic. Out of the 300,000 people that dropped out of receiving benefits in September, 50% of those claimants were women. And the child care thing is a thing. And it's not so much access, because our capacity now in the state for childcare is about 90% back. Many of them are open, but many of them also don't have the workforce, right? So they've reduced their classrooms. But beyond the accessibility is the affordability. So you really have to think about it. If you are in a minimum wage job, and remember the folks that got most disproportionately impacted in this pandemic were those essential workers, right? Folks in the retail, in food and accommodation, waste management, administrative support. They got really, really hurt. You know, so we look at all these factors, and we are also trying to figure out what best we can do. Is that we're going to need to do some reskilling and upskilling of 300,000 to 400,000 people over the next 10 years. So that's about 30,000 to 40,000 people a year.
Training is a much-needed component of filling jobs, and in the past, Secretary Acosta says, the state has been lagging in its efforts to get potential workers the skills they need to take on new ventures.
Workforce has been pretty anemically funded for decades. Workforce, you know, we talk about workforce as being the greatest asset, and we just haven't put our money where our mouth is. And so we are playing a little catch-up here, and we traditionally only train with our workforce dollars, probably about 5,000-6,000 people a year. We're going to have to do 30,000 to 40,000 folks a year.
Finally, thanks to federal funds made available in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the state has money for robust training. The issue now is getting those funds into the right hands.
The complicated thing now isn't the money. So I've always been begging for money in this job. I've been begging for money since I got here. The resources are not now there. The coordination is the hard part. Now that's going to be the tough part.
That is the situation we'll be tackling in this month's episode. We'll talk with Middlesex 3 Coalition Executive Director Stephanie Cronin, Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce President Rick Parker, and State Representative Ken Gordon. We have a lot to get to, so let's get started. And I am now joined by Middlesex 3 Coalition Executive Director Stephanie Cronin to talk about sort of the bigger regional picture of this situation. Stephanie, thank you so much for taking some time and coming into our studio today.
Thank you for having me here.
So I guess I just want to start out just in general. You know, I know you are interacting a lot with different, business leaders. What are you hearing about the current situation?
So if you don't mind, can I actually just go back and just explain a little bit for those people who don't know what the Middlesex 3 Coalition is?
Sure.
So we are a regional economic development organization. We bring the public and the private sector together to try to address some of those larger business development concerns. Burlington's obviously a member, as well as a lot of the larger companies in this area. And pre-COVID, we certainly heard a lot about transportation. No surprise, right? Traffic congestion.
Burlington, we know it well.
We're still hearing it's coming back, right? Or it is back too, right? And it's how to reduce congestion, but also how to get your workers to work as well too. How to fix those first and last mile issues. So we have shuttles that go from Boston to Cambridge up to the Route 3 corridor to try to get workers to work. But it all comes back to workforce. And even with traffic, it was how to get workers to work. It all comes back to how do you get your workers. And so we hear less about, I need to get transportation. We're still hearing some of that, but it's really, how do I get the workers that I need? Mm-hmm. And everyone needs workers. I have yet to meet a company that's not hiring and that's not having trouble finding workers.
Right. And so, I mean, I was, going around Burlington yesterday, just taking footage of all these help wanted signs. So, I mean, I see it too. Everybody's looking. Is there a sense of, why people are having such a hard time, or why businesses are having such a hard time finding the employees that they need?
And I think it doesn't come down to one simple answer or one simple solution either, right? And part of it is we're dealing with so many different types of businesses. We hear it a lot with the restaurants and the retailers. And we can talk a little bit more about that as well too later. Mm-hmm. But we hear it with the whole, the larger companies, the smaller companies, the high-tech companies, everything, everyone. And we have some workforce development subcommittees where we bring our workers together from different industries. We just did one yesterday with healthcare. We've done them with advanced manufacturing and life sciences, defense and IT. And there's always a lot of common themes, even pre-COVID, with finding the workers with the soft skills that they need and such. But a lot of it is how do you connect with the workers? And it was interesting. There was one company that was telling me that smaller company. He was telling me he was looking for workers. There were like 40 people. They were hiring about 9, and 8 of them came from Craigslist, and like the 9th one came from Facebook. Yeah, I had that same reaction.
Craigslist. I didn't know people use that.
So it kind of goes back to that. It's not just one resource that you go to. We always tell people to go to Mass Hire because that's the state's workforce development arm. They have a database of available jobs in the region. So Mass Hire, I would definitely ask people to check that out if you are looking for people or you're looking for a job as well too. But there's so many channels that are available, and I think that can make it confusing as well too.
Now, I mean, when you talk about, we think about it as far as like, a retail job, a restaurant job, they're entry levels usually, and maybe, people are looking for something different. But when you talk about high tech, people train, they go to school for that, and you'd expect that they'd be out there looking for those type of, opportunities. Is it just that we don't have enough people who are like prepared to take on those kind of more like technical jobs?
So it's interesting. So there's been some studies that have been coming out lately about why are we in this situation, right? And a lot of us, people talked about, well, it's because the federal state benefits, the unemployment benefits, and that people were just sitting home, and that once those ended, we'd have everyone rushing back, and we're not. And so the question is, why aren't we, right? And so a lot of the studies are coming back, and that, again, it doesn't come back to one simple solution, one simple answer. And there are a number of reasons that the state's looking at. So one is when you look at the number, the growth in Massachusetts, the typical growth pre-COVID and now, we've actually lost people. And a lot of that, they believe, is that because of visas and the foreign-born workers as well too, and we just haven't had as many people coming in, and that goes back to a lot of high-tech jobs too. So there's that big piece, and then there's another piece of why aren't people coming back, which has to do with anything from women were certainly impacted much more than men, and that goes back to a lot of them left the workforce because they had to help their kids with Zoom classes.
Out of school.
Or they didn't have any childcare, right? Well, so that is coming back, but it's not back completely. and childcare is not what we want it, what it needs to be as well too. So that's an issue. But even a lot of people are not going back because they're still reluctant because they don't know if their coworkers are vaccinated as well, or they may have health issues, or they may be living with somebody who has health issues. And I mean, I guess it really comes back to that there's no simple answer. Everyone is in a different situation
Right.
as well too. But then there's the other issue, which is people over 55 have left the workforce at a greater rate with early retirement. And so that's like twice the number of people who've left, the percentage left are over 55. And so it's interesting. I'm just going to keep talking.
Fine.
It's interesting because
That's why you're here.
Thanks. Pre-COVID, we had Mark Melnick from the Donahue Institute. He came to us and he talked about where's the greatest growth of, where over the next 20 years are we going to find workers? And they determined that as the two main categories would be the foreign-born population and over 65. And so those are the two areas, are two of many, that are losing population at a greater, or workforce at a greater rate as well too. And then when you look at restaurants and retailers, actually let me back up. So that over 55, so what we're looking at is, okay, how can companies, high-tech companies, keep people in the workforce working 2 or 3 days a week to continue working? If you're, instead of like,
Right.
Can we encourage people who are over 55 or 65 to work part-time at an iRobot or a MITRE or a Millipore or some of these larger high-tech companies, and a lot of them
Right. Keep their experience.
Keep their experience, because with all that experience, they probably could get done in 3 days what a new hire could get done in 5.
Right.
In theory. But a lot of these companies were looking at doing that pre-COVID. But then when you look at the restaurants and the retailers, that's hard work. How do you encourage somebody who's over 55 to be going into those fields as well too?
Yeah, I mean, it's
know.
not really as appealing. I mean, if you can, be at a desk and working on your lap or on your computer or something, that's one thing. But busting tables is a whole different type of work.
It was. I did it when I was in my 20s, and it was hard. I can't imagine doing it now. It's tough work. So anyway, that's.
And are employers finding that, like, when they have job opportunities, I know, like some office work, a lot of office work is being done remote now. Obviously lab work, you kind of need to be in the lab because, you can't bring that stuff home because, it's dangerous. But are they finding it easier to fill the jobs where people can work remotely?
I think there's so much wait and see. And during this whole last 18 months or whatever, I'm sure you guys heard it as well too. We heard it that, all right, the question was when are people going back to work? And at first it was after or during the summer, and then it was Christmas, and then it was it just kept going out.
Once we all get vaccinated. And then
Yeah, right,
that didn't
right.
happen.
And now I'm hearing January 1st, which I feel is the least believable because you're going to be in the middle of winter. It's flu season and all, but it might be. And I think it's just going to be just a gradual getting back to work. I think a lot of people do want to go back to work at least part-time. I think employers want it, and I think employees want it as well too. It's just trying to find that balance. So I feel as though everyone's kind of in a wait and see, and they're looking around at what their neighbors are doing, and nobody's certain, because nobody's certain what's going to happen. I mean, I think there's a little more clarity. But even with our shuttles that we operate, and they're certainly not at capacity. They were over capacity. We had a shadow shuttle before this. We had four shuttle routes pre-COVID. We're now down to 1. And what we've done is we have a more advanced ticketing app. So for people who want to work 2 or 3 days a week, they can just buy the shuttle seat based on that. But really, people don't necessarily know when everyone is coming back to work. And obviously that has a big impact on the restaurants, the retailers, the downtowns, and it's an issue, it's a problem.
Yeah. And is there, let's say January 1st, all of a sudden everybody does decide, like, okay, new year, new me, new job, and they want to get back to work. Is the capacity there to get that shuttle service back up to
Absolutely.
where it was before?
In fact, we have funding to start a new shuttle, and we're trying to reach out to the businesses to see if they're interested, and a number of them are. So we are trying to get another shuttle on the road. So we do have the capacity for that. But the other issue that we should talk about is we're just talking with the Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development, who's saying that this is a whole different era for her, because usually there aren't enough funds
right.
for training. Now they have a lot of funds, a lot of money. And what they're trying to do is connect with the employers, with the companies, so that we provide the right training that they need. So if anyone's working for companies that are looking for training, looking to hire people, looking to just advance their workers, the skills, please, we'd love to talk with you so we can connect you with whether it's Mass Hire or community colleges, UMass Lowell, Northeastern, whoever, to make certain that you have the training that you need. And the other piece that we want to make certain we're focused on is the equity piece of it as well too, and just make certain that those funds are going to people who in the past didn't necessarily have the advantages or have the skills that they needed. So make certain we target them the right way as well too.
Well, that's what I wanted to shift to, is because obviously it's difficult for businesses right now that they can't find the people that they're looking for, but it's also, on the flip side, it seems like a good opportunity for people who want to try something different in their lives. And when you talk about all this funding out there for training and development, if somebody is, maybe they worked a retail job and they never thought of themselves as somebody who could go apply for Millipore, for example, is now a time that that those opportunities are now available where maybe they weren't in the past?
Well, absolutely, and especially Burlington, to their credit, Melissa Totoklis.
Yes,
she
Economic Development Director.
She's wonderful. She in the town of Bedford applied for federal money for training employees in life sciences as well. So they're really trying to, in the town of Burlington, with Kristen Kasner, they've done a great job changing their permitting to attract more life science companies
right.
too. And so in order to attract them, you obviously need the workers. So there are funds available that the town was able to obtain to help train people as well too for life science jobs as well. So Melissa might be also another great contact as well too, but I'd be happy to talk with anybody if they're interested. Mass Hire, and they do that through Mass Hire, so Mass Hire would also
right.
be
Yeah,
there.
we wrote about that
Yeah.
program,
Yeah.
so I mean, yeah, it was a good thing. Melissa was.
Was she on?
She was excited about it.
She's excited about
a story.
everything.
Well, that's
Yeah.
true too.
She's great.
But again, I'm just sort of to emphasize the point. People who are maybe looking for a career change, now is a time for them to look at something different.
And that was another one of those factors of why people are staying at home, because they're re-examining their current job. And people who schlep to Boston for an hour, 2 hours commute are now thinking, do I really want to do that, or is there something else that I want to do? So people are hesitant to be jumping back into the workforce if this might be a good time for them to reevaluate, as you said.
Right. I know another industry, we talk a lot about restaurants and retail and, other parts of the show, we've focused on that quite a bit, but healthcare seems to also be being impacted. Is that kind of like COVID burnout? Is it like just people being reluctant to go back and, with the ongoing pandemic and not everybody getting vaccinated? Or like, what are you hearing as far as
great time with that, because we just had a roundtable, virtual roundtable with our healthcare partners in Mass Hire and the community colleges, and about how do we make certain you have the workers that you need. And again, it goes back to that there's not one simple answer, right? And we were focused really on CNA as workers as well too. And there's a funding issue with that too, is it's tough work. And it's not necessarily the best paying jobs as well too. So how do you make certain you get the workers you need, but then make certain that they're able to move on and on and up as well too, with some of their training and their education. And a lot of these hospitals, to their credit, I think it was Newton Wellesley, I could send you the link, because they're doing a nice 4-part webinar series of what type of training you need in order to obtain the various positions that are available. And that's what a lot of it is. And part of what we're doing is, again, working with Mass Hire and connecting some of our high school students with the companies as well, and because some of the companies say to us that the teachers, they're fabulous, they're great, they're passionate, but the technology is changing so quickly in a lot of these life science companies that they're not teaching what the companies need today. So we need to make certain that we're doing more externships, internships, field trips, that type of things as well too, so that we get the kids and the teachers connected with the companies.
Okay, and so now let's talk about the restaurant industry a little bit, just because I think that is where the public interacts and sees where the shortages is when you order a pizza.
Sure.
It's now an hour wait rather than half an hour. What are you hearing as far as what they're facing in terms of trying to get new people in, trying to get their traditional students that normally would work for them, also immigrant community that would work for them, the difficulties there?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, they faced the brunt of the last few years as well too. I mean, the smaller restaurants and retailers especially, just they really did go through a lot, there's still an uphill battle. Everything we talk about with whether your workers are able to get the childcare that they need in order to go to work, or the transportation that they need, or all those things, just basically the workers that you need. It's just that much harder for the restaurants and the retailers. And then on top of that, if your office workers, your 9-to-5 workers are not back, they're not going out to the restaurants to support them as well too. So it's not an easy answer, and it's not a quick answer either. I know we had a lot of conversations during the whole pandemic with our municipalities, with our chambers, and bringing in like the Mass Restaurant Association and various groups as well, and really just trying to share ideas, share best practices, whether it's with permitting or zoning or outdoor dining or marketing, just so our communities can kind of collaborate and see how they can help the restaurants. And the thought was we need to get them to the other side. That was always the idea, is how do we get through this? And we're getting through it, but we're not through it all the way.
No, I mean, I've talked to some restaurant managers and such, and they just say those, they keep posting everywhere that they can, and they're just not getting the responses that they're used to, so it's difficult.
Well, and it was difficult pre-COVID, right? I mean, we talked about the shuttle that we had going from Lowell down to Burlington in order to try to address the shortage, and that was it was hard. It was hard to do that pre-COVID, but it's that much more difficult now, and that shuttle's no longer running. It just couldn't be sustained during that time. So I think it really comes back to that we're in a new era, and we need to be thinking differently as well too. And maybe part of it's Craigslist and Facebook and other ways like that. I don't think any of us have I don't think there's one answer. I think there's 100 different answers, and we just need to kind of see what's going to work for the different restaurants and retailers out there.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's on Facebook. Not everyone's on Mass Hire. And I didn't know people were still on Craigslist. I haven't personally checked it out in a long time.
Right.
I guess one of the other questions is, there seems to be, the restaurant workers, for example. It's a lot of hours. It's late hours, and it's sort of, and obviously it's set hours. It's when the restaurants are open. And this past week I had car trouble, and I took an Uber for I think the second time in my life, and the guy said since COVID, he's making more money than ever with Uber.
Oh, interesting.
So, there's also competition with what they call the gig economy. Mm-hmm. Is that a factor that you're hearing?
That people are going there to work?
People, like choosing Uber or Lyft or these sort of choose your own hours, make your kind of own sort of schedule, rather than going back to more established.
I'm not hearing it. I'm not saying it's not happening, but I'm not hearing it. And I maybe I'm just not in, maybe I'm not talking to the right people. I don't know. But that's a whole nother dynamic as well too, right? And everything going on with Uber and Lyft, and how expensive is it? How expensive is it now versus 3 years ago as well too, and that the prices have increased as well. And
as far as people getting to work.
Yeah. And so
that makes sense.
I don't know. I guess it's not giving you the right answer there, but
that's okay.
Sorry.
We had talked before we started taping about another subject, and that was, what you're hearing as far as businesses having, issues, restaurants getting the supplies, because we have this global supply chain problem, I guess, it's very complicated.
Yeah.
Excuse me. What are you hearing, what's sort of like, the talk about what different companies are facing as far as that goes?
Yeah, and as I said then, it's not an easy issue, and it's not, none of the issues that we work with are easy, right? Workforce, transportation, whatever, housing, not easy. But how can we, in our region, help to move that needle just a little? And certainly the supply shortage, we hear it a lot, honestly, with construction on our real estate side, and just even in terms of quoting for jobs, and how construction folks used to be able to quote a number of months out, and now it's only a couple of days out because prices were changing so quickly as well too. But a lot of it, it really, again, and I say that all the stuff that we do, it all comes back to workforce, and how do you get the workers that you need? And that is part of the workforce, right? How do you get the drivers that you need?
Right, the truckers and...
Right. I don't know how we're going to move that needle in Burlington, but because it seems like most of it needs to come from California.
Yep.
But it's still, it all works together as well too. And how do you make certain that we do have the workers that you need? We talked so much pre-COVID about AI as well too, and truck driving was supposed to be one of those fields, right, where you have your autonomous vehicles.
Frighteningly
enough, but maybe that will be it. But we still need to get through to the other side, and maybe that will help to help our problems. I won't say solve our problems, but maybe it'll help to alleviate some of our problems. And what type of autonomous vehicles or intelligence is out there that we're able to harness in order to help us.
Right.
Another issue.
Maybe this big infrastructure package that just passed will help, get the roads better condition.
Yeah, we just want them paved right now, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Right, yeah.
Well, we're in New England, so yeah. They can just take the bumps out. That would be
that will help us. But a lot of it does, and a lot of what we're dealing with still goes back to sustainability as well too, and that also is a transportation issue. Is how do you get some of these cars off the road? And during COVID, that certainly did help us. I used to joke that I can't wait to get back to complaining about traffic, and that'd be more normal. But sustainability is certainly a big issue for us, and that's part of what we're trying to do is help some of our companies obtain some of the ways, share best practices to become more sustainable, because workers want to work for companies that are sustainable. And so how can we help our workers just learn ideas, best practices of sustainable development?
Right. And I guess last thing, we'll just, because we are in November, and we're talking about, retail having difficulty and restaurants having difficulty hiring people. Is there a lot of concern about, this upcoming holiday crunch?
Well, we're early in November as well, too. I don't think it's just one area that we're concerned with. There's just so many areas that we are concerned with. Yes, but we've been concerned with that for many years, right? I don't know if that's, making certain you have the workers that you need. But part of it is also we want to make certain we're shopping locally too, right? Because a lot of people are, we're getting more and more used to just getting things online.
Right.
So I guess the flip side to that is let's make certain that we're able to get out and shop locally at our, local stores.
We don't want to shift everything to Amazon.
We really don't.
Jeff Bezos has enough money.
he's doing quite well.
I mean, if you can go to space, you have enough money.
Right.
All right.
So-
Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Probably a lot, but maybe we'll come back and we'll do another segment on it.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you very much, and best of luck with all the work that you do over there at the Middlesex 3 Coalition.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
And I am now joined by Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce President Rick Parker to talk about these issues. Rick, thanks for taking some time and coming down to the studio today.
Thanks for having me, Rich.
So I just wanted to start off kind of broadly, just, you obviously have, your ear to the floor when it comes to the Burlington and the area business community. So what are you hearing from people? What are the difficulties that they're facing?
Well, I think, obviously, on the topic, the number one challenge that most companies are having right now, especially those that face the public, is staffing at all levels, whether it be healthcare, technology companies that need people to be on site, life science companies, and obviously the retail and hospitality restaurant sectors are the ones that are really the most hit.
Yeah, no, I think we hear most about, the retail or the, restaurants and, hotels and things. But you're saying that it's even businesses that, just have employees working in labs or in manufacturing.
Yeah, it's really anyone who had to show up for work. There are a number of remote, work from home jobs available, but predominantly the ones that are having the most difficulty being filled are those that are on site. And there are issues, related to COVID. There are some people that don't feel, quite safe yet and don't know what the situation is going to be at these locations. And I can assure you that it's a topic that we talk about, with our landlords and with the companies to make sure that employee safety is first and foremost. But those that face the public, healthcare there's a major shortage right now in healthcare. I would say, before coming on here, it's close to 1,000 jobs right here in Burlington in the healthcare industry. Certainly Leahy is a big part of that, but also the urgent care and other, doctors' offices and dentist offices trying to find that support staff.
Is it because people are kind of burnt out from it, from working, during, in healthcare during a pandemic, or what are some of the factors that you hear are going into these issues?
Yeah, it's a multifaceted question and answer. I think as a lot of businesses shut down during the pandemic, people who have been working all their lives, going to work, were at home. Some of them were able to work from home, but others, especially retail, healthcare, that were home for some period of time, saw a different life. Those, especially in restaurants and retail, were home with their families. They were home for nights. They were home during the weekends, and the growth of the gig economy. People that are able to go to Instacart and these online, whether it be Uber, Lyft, Uber Eats, they're able to pick up jobs on their schedule. And that's led to taking a lot of people out of those jobs that would have been retail and hospitality, but also people that are able to now look at other opportunities outside of the traditional workspace are doing that. There are other industries, the financial industries, that are looking to people who might have been in retail and hospitality, who had great interpersonal skills, and trying to train them up and bring them into another industry. So there's a lot of things here that are happening, and traditionally a lot of these jobs have been filled by people who couldn't, whether they're going to school during the day and could only work nights or weekends. Those types of people were really needed in restaurants and hospitality, and now they're found other alternatives. And we didn't even mention Amazon and online shopping, and Amazon, it's, depending on what estimates you hear, between 25 and 30% of people that were previously in hospitality are now working with Amazon.
Really, just because of their increased demand for workers, or just hiring up everybody?
Increased demand for workers, certainly some flexibility in determining your schedule and benefits. And the thing that people constantly think that there's people that are just home on unemployment. people in those industries are workers, and a lot of them didn't stay around waiting for things to come back. They're used to being working, and some of the larger organizations like Amazon and Uber reached out to those people while they were unemployed, and been able to grab a few of those up.
Amazon just taking over the world. But there has to be some kind of a dynamic. I'm just trying to say, as far as more people working in the gig industry, I mean, doesn't that sort of offer some help to the restaurants? For example, like, if they have a lot of, of their customers ordering Uber Eats or DoorDash, that means they have orders going out without the need for a wait staff.
There certainly is a segment, you're right, there's a segment of the restaurants that have benefited from that. Ones that have a good takeout menu, or maybe they didn't have a takeout menu before COVID, but have gone, that way now.
Yeah.
But the restaurants that are here in Burlington, and they go across the whole spectrum. But there are some, mid to upper level that have depended historically on the daytime population and the corporate credit card, and those things are in short supply these days.
Right. And are you hearing? So I know we've talked a little bit about the issues that we have. Or what are the discussions around what could be done?
I think the first and foremost is getting people vaccinated, getting people feeling safe. I would say in the last few weeks, we're starting to see more people out. Unfortunately, it's coming at a time when the weather is starting to change, and people who have been very comfortable outdoor dining, there's still some that aren't so comfortable indoor dining.
Yeah.
But, without another variant that would come out, the Delta variant certainly threw us a curveball and set things back. But we've seen good numbers, primarily good numbers going forward, and if we continue to get people vaccinated, get people with the boosters, get people feeling confident, and we see the numbers drop, I think that's going to be the determining factor in getting people back to the office.
And as far as the restaurant industry, is it a lack of customers as well, or is it just the worker shortage?
It's a little bit of both. Certainly, like I said, the daytime population that might have been out for the lunch business is down. You still see many restaurants, have limited hours for lunch, or maybe a couple of days a week they're closed. That's really because that daytime population is not here. The demand is there, the choice is there, but it is kind of a perfect storm. You've got labor shortages, which drives the cost of labor up. You've got supply shortages, which drives the cost of goods up.
Right.
And just the overall energy costs are up. I know a lot of people think that the restaurant industry, these people make a lot of money. The margins are very small.
Right.
And if you're not able to utilize your full capacity because of labor shortages, or you're just closed a couple of days, it's difficult to be able to make a profit.
Right. People always say, obviously the solution if you want people to come back to work is to pay them more, but it's not always an option, especially for small businesses.
Yeah, and the public, we all, we don't want to pay $9 for a cup of coffee and $200 for a steak. Somewhere in between there, people will go out less when the costs go up, and people are, we're trying to make sure that people in the hospitality and restaurant industry are paid fairly. And
Right.
I think if you look out there now with some of the recruitment bonuses that are out there and the hourly wages, I think things are coming around. This may have been an industry that had a bad reputation. People were underpaid. I think that's changing, and certainly it's changing here. We're seeing very competitive wages. It's just a matter of getting people that want to go into the industry and understand that there is, especially here, room for growth. We've seen people who, started as a dishwasher be promoted through the ranks, and I know that Joe Farrow has, over at Tuscan Kitchen, has a general manager that started only a couple of years ago as an entry-level person. So there is room for growth, especially with a lot of the restaurants that we've got here in Burlington.
Right. Yeah, a lot of opportunity in the area. You had mentioned people being hesitant to go into to workspaces because of they're still unsure about COVID. Do you think that employers should require vaccinations?
That's a very slippery slope because the market is so competitive now. I think we saw that employers, I personally would love to see everyone mandated to get a vaccine because we'll be through this. However, we've seen employers that have mandated it, and there are some people on the other side of the topic that absolutely won't get vaccinated, so they end up leaving and going to a company that doesn't mandate them. So it's a slippery slope when you're asking for mandates when you're trying to hire people. Keep in mind that people have opportunities like never before. I know at the Chamber, networking has always been a big part of what the Chamber does for small business. For a while, people didn't feel, comfortable about going out networking. Now they do, but the world's changed. People don't get up to go out at 7 o'clock in the morning. We say, everyone's ready from the waist up at 7:30, but to be able to go out, the world's changed from the pandemic, and businesses are having to adjust for it.
And, so you mentioned networking. Are there other ways that, the Chamber, for example, or businesses can work with either state or government or, other organizations that, maybe if they can't right now hire as many people and get the workforce up as best they can, but still get some of the resources that are available?
I would say the pandemic has brought on a collaboration between government and business, certainly greater than I've ever seen in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. We meet with Secretary Acosta from Secretary of Labor and Secretary Keneally, Housing and Economic Development. It was every 2 weeks. They want to hear what's going on. They want to make sure that they're putting their efforts in the right pockets right now. And with ARPA funding coming out, they want to make sure that the money is being spent wisely. Keep in mind, the unemployment system was totally overrun when this first happened, so we had to get the unemployment system working. We've got to get it funded to make sure that it remains solvent and doesn't become, an impediment for small business to be able to keep running. I do think that there's been better collaboration than ever before, but there are some major challenges coming here in the new world order of business. And Burlington, we've always depended so much on that daytime population. As we bring life sciences in for those jobs that have to be done here, that helps, but we have to consider that some jobs are going to remain remote, and we have to find ways to make up for that.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense that some businesses don't want to, pay to, lease office space if they have as much effectiveness as people working at home. So.
Yeah, I think it does open up the opportunities for small businesses and those tech companies, 50 people or less, that maybe were priced out of Burlington before or just couldn't occupy enough square footage to get a footprint here in Burlington. As leases come up for renewal for places that may have had 200,000 or 300,000 square feet, maybe they drop that number, and it opens up some opportunities for smaller companies to come in. And we look to build on the life science clusters that we've got started, because that's the most immediate need, in the industry.
Right. All right, changing tacks a little bit. I'm not trying to put you in any hot water at all. So
you do a good job of that, Rich. I'm open for it.
As far as looking more at like the restaurant, hospitality. I didn't know this worker shortage. How much of an impact do you think perhaps we had with COVID a pretty immigration kind of came to a halt, and then obviously we had, Trump's policies that was sort of a little bit less welcoming to outside people. Is that being part of the factor here?
It's a major factor.
Yeah.
If you put yourself in, the first generation immigrants that come here, there's a process to naturalization and being documented, and it takes some time. It's always been kind of the gray area, and it's one of those that those are the people that want to come in, they want to work, and where English is a second language. Restaurant industry has been one of those that's been very open to those that don't speak English.
Right.
And a lot of the back of house has been dominated by those. So I do think that was a major drawback. When people are looking on the news and seeing people, being escorted over to ICE.
Right. Kids in cages.
It absolutely was an issue. And if I was in the same position, I would be, a little reluctant to get into the workplace there. So I think, especially with high school and college kids that aren't going into these industries before, that have been, that had been a stepping stone for people, certainly of my age. Most people at one point were in retail or hospitality. They aren't being met with those, that crew is not coming to that industry. So I do think, this is it's one of those industries that first generation immigrants come and prosper.
Right.
There's the ability to take people and pull them right into the middle class in some of these jobs. And retail's the same way. These public-facing jobs are the ones that are in highest demand. And we didn't even really get into healthcare yet. There is a major problem with healthcare, and where vaccines are being mandated there, they're losing a few people, but they're losing people to other areas in the country that are being hit by COVID a little harder. The recruitment bonuses, the relocation costs, and then a bump in salary are very difficult for people, especially in the Northeast, that are coming into the winter thinking, maybe Florida is the solution for now. So that's a major pull on people in the healthcare industry.
So there's like regional competition for people that's driving that.
There's not a lot that we can do locally about the regional competition. However, as we look at specifically in the restaurant and hospitality industry, we want to bring people from outside the area and not just have, the latest store or the latest restaurant that comes in that pulls from existing places, because that usually leaves the small guy, out and working around the clock on his own, and that's not sustainable.
No, you do hear that the new restaurant opens and it's like, oh, this is the team from the other restaurant that is now filling in. Well, on that line, I mean, I know one of the big issues that you and one of our other guests in this show, State Rep Kevin Gordon, we're working on is transportation, trying to get workers from Lowell or other areas to restaurants. Maybe they don't have a license or they don't have a car, or gas is $3.50 and it's not worth it anymore. Any sort of headway on those type of ideas?
Yeah, again, with funding being out there for some of the transportation infrastructure programs, I think transportation is always going to be one of the keys one of the key solutions. Not only for people who don't have a car, for people who don't have licenses. There's a whole generation of people coming up that look at the financial equation of owning a vehicle. I know that, my son, he's moved to Somerville, he does have a car, but you can get around pretty well without a car there and the expense of a car. So you've got to think that generation of people that are out there that might not have a car, you have to make it easy for them to get here. And not only that, Rich, when they're here, you have to make it easy for them to get around during the day. Specifically at lunchtime, if you want to activate other areas in the town, and you've got people that are coming in on public transportation that are really on an island in that business, unless we can have some local transportation. So we're having these discussions, at the chamber. We're having it, in the town with the Selectmen's Transportation Committee. This is a great opportunity. If anything comes, there are some good things that come out of the pandemic. It's thinking, outside the box. And why not try this? And the addition of some funding from the federal government helps to maybe come up with some solutions that we haven't thought about before.
Excellent. All right, well, we've covered quite a lot. Anything last point you'd like to make?
For anyone out there that's still unvaccinated, and I do believe that people have their own choice to what to do, but when it affects the rest of us, when it affects the economy, when it affects people's ability to make a living, please think beyond yourself. Vaccination and eradicating the virus is key for all of us to move forward. I think we've got a lot of lessons that we've learned from this, but getting people back to work, one of the things we didn't mention, when you're at work, that serendipity, the conversations at the water cooler, and also being here to help support the community and the charitable organizations, that's a big part of the daytime population of these businesses. So we'd like to see them come back in a safe manner, and get things back to as close to normal as we can.
Absolutely. All right, you heard it. Get vaccinated. All right, well, thank you once again for coming in and spending some time talking about, the issues of the day.
Thanks, Rich. Glad to be here.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. I'm now joined by State Rep Ken Gordon. Ken, thanks for taking some time and talking about these important issues with us.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate the
So,
opportunity.
from your position, at the state level, what are you seeing as far as the issues facing businesses right now?
Yeah, so Massachusetts, like the rest of the country, is in a situation, it's really a crisis situation. It faces many industries where companies can't find applicants. They can't find access to labor. We have job openings posted all over the town. Burlington is no different than many of the other towns in the state as well. I think the problem was really exacerbated by the COVID-19 crisis. I mean, we were headed to a shift in the way that people are employed anyway, but a number of factors have come together to create the kind of perfect storm of this labor shortage. You can look at it in many different ways. I don't know if you want me to go on, but if you have a specific question, I can.
Well, I wanted to say, I know one of the ways that you're looking to help address it is, there's the House bill with the American Recovery Plan Act that's, in the works right now, and you are trying to put in, some funds for the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce. I don't know if you want to talk about how that sort of fits into the larger puzzle.
Yeah, so that bill, which we passed this week, the Senate is taking it up. Actually, we passed it last week. The Senate is taking it up this week. We'll get together and work out any differences and send it to the governor. But we have a large workforce and development component that was led by our House Chair, Josh Cutler, which I support completely. What we did was within that, we took a focus on the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce, and we directed $150,000 to go to it, because I think one of the values that the Chamber of Commerce in Burlington offers to small business is that it knows where programs can be found to identify potential work if it's out there. It knows where training is being done, and it understands the rules and regulations of the road that can benefit small business. In part because they're experienced, knowledgeable people on their board and on their staff, and Rick Parker does a great job keeping himself informed, in part because they reach out to me and to Senator Friedman and make sure they're up to date on everything. The problem that a lot of our small businesses have is that they're struggling to the extent that they can't even afford the dues to belong to the chamber anymore.
Right.
If they ever could. So what this bill does is it allows the chamber some financial flexibility so they can help businesses that may be struggling to remain members, and maybe reach out to non-members and show them the benefits, help them as well. I mean, I've just unfortunately been in communication with Burlington businesses that are not members of the chamber that spent money on things not knowing they didn't have to spend that money. And, had they known, it would have been a lot more efficient for them to have participated in that type of an organization that could have told them what they needed, what they had to do, and what they didn't have to do. So Chamber is a very valuable resource for our businesses. That's why I supported it.
I mean, I think, a big part of what you're saying is, a lot of times the resources are out there, jobs are out there, but maybe it's making that, connection between, the people who need it and the people and, the resources available.
Yeah, but we are at a time where getting people who are out there is very difficult, and making those connections. And we're trying to do that. So through this bill and through programs that already existed, we do have job training programs, reentry. We have programs for people who have jobs but are looking for a job in a different field, or perhaps related field, perhaps technology changed and their skills aren't needed for what they're doing now, but they're very good workers and can help. So for those folks, they can start by going to the One Stop Career Center in Woburn. It's at 100 Trade Center, which is where it's where Strega Prime is. What did I do? It's where the courthouse is, but Strega Prime is a better landmark. It's in there, so people can just stop in there and find out, what programs are there for me. But what's happened now is with respect to the workforce, when we went through a time where businesses shut down because of the COVID pandemic, people lost their jobs, they were laid off. We addressed that through unemployment increases. And by the way, there was a real cry that additional payments that were made to people during this pandemic lasted too long, and that people, that was the reason why there wasn't access to labor. Well, it's
Yeah, I
been a
heard that
few
a lot.
months now. Yeah, you heard that a lot, right? Well, that ended beginning of September, and here we are in November, and the labor numbers haven't increased much. So I don't think that was it. I think people saw, with respect to some industries, once they lost their job, they looked around and said, there are other ways to make money. There's competition from what we call the gig economy, which would be people who drive Uber and Lyft and Instacart, who have more independence in their career and so they can replace income that they were making in the service businesses, such as restaurants or hospitality, or in places like grocery stores. And so now going back might be less attractive for them because, they don't have to work nights and weekends and, do some of the things that they had to do before, because the opportunities are there for them in these other places. People during the pandemic started using things like Instacart. People who would never have thought about doing that because they didn't want to go to a grocery store, that became more popular. Or the DoorDash or Uber Eats or those places that bring restaurant meals to you, that became much more popular, accessible, and I think people continue to do that. So we've lost some traditional jobs to places like that were not that popular, especially here in the suburbs before the pandemic.
Right. I mean,
Right.
it seems like, if you're driving for Uber or especially some of the meal delivery plans, I mean, you're going to be kind of facing some of the same pressures that you would working in a restaurant. I mean, it would be more nights and weekends because that's when people use those services the most, I would imagine. And also, you're relying on tips and that kind of thing. It seems like, almost it would be difficult to make the switch completely to that, when it's kind of with the same pressures.
The difference for a lot of people is you do set your own schedule. So I would make more money working weekends because of meal delivery, but I'm not sure that it's that much. Maybe it's that much more popular Saturday night to have a takeout brought to you. But I think that exists every night of the week, and it might be that the most popular times kind of end at 7:00. Whereas if you're in a restaurant, you're required to work until 9 or then start to clean up. You're there till 10. Whereas once your meal is delivered, you're done.
No.
So, and you're right that there's an issue with that whole industry with respect to the way that folks are paid. We can get into that. That's probably a different show for you, but that deals with probably the potential ballot question coming up about the independent worker. I'd love to talk to you, but I don't want to derail your conversation
So
here.
I guess, is there any sort of discussion about things, with the business community about what can be done, along with things like supporting chambers of commerce and things like that?
Yeah, well, the first thing that we've got to do, thank you about the chambers of commerce, but the first thing that we have to do is focus on how best we can get out of this COVID emergency, which is to say now people can get vaccinated, they can get back to work. Once they get back to work, the supply chain can be eased somewhat because that is also plaguing our businesses. They can't get, if you're in a restaurant, you can't get the material that you need to do takeout, and there's so much takeout. We just talked about the restaurant deliveries. That all requires all of that material that wasn't needed before, but that's really hard to get now because those industries were hard hit by unemployment and they're just getting back on their feet. So there's really this domino effect of businesses getting back to full speed and being able to service the other businesses that depend on them. So I think that once we get workers back and they can get back safely, and I'll say once we get workers vaccinated so that other workers know that they can get back into work safely, because that's also a problem with access to labor is there are people that just don't want to work if they're not assured that it's a safe place with respect to the COVID virus. Another issue, and it's a bill that I filed and I'm working hard on, is childcare. People, a lot of the childcare centers closed during COVID, but it was always a problem. That's also an industry where people are vastly underpaid. So what we're looking at is just completely reforming the way that we provide daycare and preschool, what we call early education for children, because once we do that, along with being good for the children, good with the families, it also opens up access to labor among parents, mostly women, who can't go out because there's no place for them to bring their children now. There may be no place safe, but there may be no place at all in many instances. So we have a bill that we've filed. We've got, I think, over 100 co-sponsors, meaning it's got a lot of support among my among my colleagues and constituents as well. But that's the problem that we've got to solve.
Yeah, I mean, childcare, of course. I mean, sometimes you hear people say it's like, is it even worth it? Because it's like one parent can work pretty much just to pay for daycare.
Correct. That's exactly the problem, and that's what really brought me to that bill. I thought of that a couple of years ago. We were in that situation, by the way. My wife was working in an office, and we looked at what are we doing here, and it's very important to spend time with your infant, and I think many people in our situation are in that. It's just not worth it. But many other people who are making less money than we were as a family are also looking at, they had no choice. Where am I going to bring my child, because we've got to pay the rent? And we brought those two issues together. So I filed this bill with my colleague Adrian Matero from East Boston, and so he's got constituents there that they've got to get to work, but they can't, and it's a huge problem. Ours is, from a financial point of view, it makes no sense to do that. And in all of our communities, the issue is we've got to get people paid enough that it's a field that people will go into and not have such turnover that the preschool teachers and daycare providers still are always leaving because it's not a living wage. So we can, maybe that's the difference. Maybe we'll have a series of these conversations, Rich, but that is something that we have devised a plan that through a sliding scale, and it's really based on what they do in the military. They do a Hanscom right now. Depending on your rank, you get a subsidy, and daycare is available to you. And it's affordable to you because they take into account your salary through your rank. And when I asked the base commander at the time, why do you do this? He said, because people need to get to work. And in our case, they need to get to work defending our country. They can't be distracted. So it's got to be safe, effective, and reliable. And therefore, our workers, meaning our military service people, are comfortable at work.
Now,
that was Chad Ellsworth, by the way, the former base commander.
What's that?
Chad Ellsworth was his name, the former base commander, Colonel Ellsworth.
I know one of the programs that you were working on pre-pandemic, or one of the issues that you had identified was, people wanted to work, but they weren't able to get to work because of transportation issues. We had the shuttle, to go to Lowell to pick up restaurant workers. I don't know if I think that may have stopped during the pandemic, and I'm not really sure where it is now. But do you have anything sort of like looking at, connecting those, the employees and the employers through, some kind of program focused on transportation?
Yeah, so we're going to be taking up a bill, I think in the next few weeks, that's going to look at better funding, increased funding for transportation. And I'll be looking at specifically what we can do in our district to do just that. This last ARPA funding bill, we didn't do that because we think we're getting more federal funding specifically for transportation. And so you're right that there are people looking for work in one area and jobs that are open in another. Although right now, again, there aren't as many people looking for work as there were pre-pandemic. So we've got to just focus on the problem at hand.
All right. Well, there's a lot of moving parts in this, and I don't know if anyone has any, all the solutions, but it's good to, at least have you come on and talk about what is sort of in the works and what is being looked at.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's always my pleasure to talk to you about these issues, and just to tell you again that I'm always just really, I'm very respectful of the fact that BCAT and BNEWS, acts as the voice of our district, so of our town, so that people, they get the information they need, and you guys provide a tremendously valuable service.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you always being available for an interview or a comment or whatever we need. So,
thank you. I really sincerely appreciate the opportunity, because you do provide that, and that's how how people from Burlington can learn about what's going on, in the government around them. So thank you for doing that.
All right. Well, thank you, and we will talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it.
So there you have it, an in-depth look at the worker shortage situation and what local leaders in business and government are doing to try to address it. I'd like to thank my guests, Middlesex 3 Coalition Executive Director Stephanie Cronin, Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce President Rick Parker, and State Rep Ken Gordon for their participation. I'd also like to thank all of you for watching. We'll be back with another edition of BNews In Depth next month, so stay tuned.